Story 1. I come from a rather humble family in a small town. It was there that I spent my childhood with my parents, who owned a small restaurant. My life revolved around that restaurant. I would attend school in the morning and help my parents with chores in the afternoon. Despite the lack of luxuries, I was content with my simple life. As I completed my schooling, I had the opportunity to pursue further studies in the city, supported by my parents. However, I chose to remain in my hometown. I was happy there, surrounded by my friends, and my job at the restaurant provided me with everything I needed. Though the prospect of finding love lingered in the back of my mind, my parents discouraged any potential suitors, fearing they would take me away from them. Over time, I watched my friends and cousins find love and start their own lives. They assured me that the right person would come along, but as I reached the age of 28, doubt started creeping in. Most men who arrived in our village were temporary workers or travelers passing through, making it difficult to find a lasting connection. In 2020, the pandemic struck, and I found myself in isolation. I began to lose hope, and to make matters worse, my parents fell victim to the virus and passed away. I was devastated, drowning in grief and loneliness. However, one morning, a young man knocked on my door, and his smile brought a glimmer of light to my dark world. He explained that he had just arrived from the city and was working for a construction company. Seeking a recommendation for a place to eat, he expressed his struggle to find food as his accommodations didn't offer cooking facilities. In that moment, I saw an opportunity to rebuild my life. I suggested reopening my parents' restaurant, and he eagerly accepted the idea. After a few days, the restaurant resumed its operations, and he became a regular customer, always arriving punctually for lunch. I served him with enthusiasm, finding myself captivated by his presence. As days turned into weeks, I started delivering his meals personally to the construction site. Looking back, I realize it was a mistake to invest so deeply in a man I barely knew, especially considering our age difference. Excited about my newfound affection, I shared the news with my friends and sought their advice on how to win him over. In an attempt to impress him, I dressed in more modern and revealing clothes, a departure from the traditional attire of our village. To my delight, he invited me to the park for ice cream, marking the beginning of our dating relationship. However, it lasted only 6 months. When his work contract ended, he announced his departure to his hometown. Refusing to let love slip away so easily, I proposed that he stay in the village and help me with the restaurant. I assured him that my parents' house was available for us to live in, relieving any concerns about accommodation. He agreed, and we got married, filling me with joy and fulfillment. A few months into our marriage, he asked me to accommodate his sister and her daughter, who were going through a challenging period after being abandoned by her husband. I agreed wholeheartedly, believing that love and kindness should guide our actions. Meanwhile, I discovered that I was pregnant, and the news brought me overwhelming happiness. I couldn't wait to share the incredible news with my husband and embrace the dream of starting a family together. However, my happiness was short-lived. Upon returning home one day, I overheard a conversation between his supposed sister and him. It became painfully clear that they were not siblings but a married couple. The little girl I had thought was his niece turned out to be his daughter. My heart shattered in that moment of realization, knowing that the man who had deceived me and taken advantage of my trust would be the father of my child. I felt betrayed and believed that love was not meant for me. The pain was compounded by the fact that I was now carrying the child of a man who had manipulated my kindness and deceived me. Story 2. I had been wandering the city streets for a couple of weeks, desperately searching for a job. My resources were dwindling, and if I didn't secure employment soon, I would be left destitute, unable to support my struggling parents. Frustration consumed me, but I refused to succumb to defeat. With my last resume clutched tightly in hand, I braved the rainy Friday afternoon to submit it at a small store, hoping it would grant me the long-awaited opportunity. As if fate had intervened, I handed in my resume at that humble establishment, a branch of one of the country's prominent food chains. Despite the manager's apparent haste, he agreed to peruse my credentials and cordially informed me to expect him the next day, as they were actively seeking personnel and found my profile appealing. The following morning, buoyed by hope and anticipation, I awoke with renewed vigor. The prospect of commencing a new job filled me with excitement. Due to my proficiency in numbers, showcased on my resume, I was assigned the role of a cashier. The initial weeks went by smoothly, and I settled into my responsibilities. However, my initial manager, the one who had hired me, was abruptly transferred to another location. I bid him farewell, regretting his departure as I was deeply grateful for the opportunity he had bestowed upon me. Yet, I paid little heed to this change, focusing solely on giving my best in my work. Little did I realize the storm brewing on the horizon, the arrival of a wolf in sheep's clothing. The new manager was an attractive and amiable man, slightly older than the rest of the staff. His presence ignited a transformation within the store's atmosphere. Layoffs and resignations became rampant, particularly among the female employees. Nevertheless, I refused to join the ranks of the inquisitive. I was determined not to become the next victim. One morning, as I arrived at my post, a colleague from the previous shift approached me, informing me that the boss awaited my presence in his office to discuss something of great interest. My mind immediately swayed between the possibility of private conversation with the man and the fear of being dismissed. My attire that day was noticeable, designed to captivate the attention of superiors. My skirt, daringly high, showcased my long, shapely legs, drawing gazes with every step I took. In an act of calculated allure, I left a few buttons of my blouse undone, revealing a modest glimpse of my ample bosom. These conscious choices aimed to refresh and entertain the onlookers whenever I stooped to pick up an item, serving as an enchanting visual spectacle. On my way to the boss's office, my phone rang, and I answered to my father's voice filled with concern. He informed me of an accident my mother had suffered while bathing, resulting in a significant injury. He was already en route to the hospital with her and requested my presence for support during this trying time. In an instant, my perspective shifted as if a device to eradicate frivolous thoughts had been activated. I cast aside my whimsical ideologies and rushed to the hospital without seeking permission from anyone. Upon arriving, I discovered my father in the company of the doctor. He explained that despite the severity of the fall, the injury was not severe, but my mother required observation for the remainder of the day. I remained steadfastly at her side, perched on the hospital benches, keeping a vigilant eye on her. Late in the afternoon, the doctor returned, delivering the news that everything had gone well, and my mother was cleared to go home. However, he emphasized the necessity of following a series of costly treatments meticulously to prevent complications. Having only worked at the store for a few weeks, I lacked the means to afford these treatments, even basic clothing suitable for visiting the hospital. I had already resorted to credit to secure the attire required for my job, but without hesitation, I took the doctor's prescription, stating confidently, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." Though unsure of how I would fulfill this promise, I was resolved to do anything for the sake of my mother. Thoughts of doubling my shifts or taking out a loan raced through my mind, driven by unwavering determination. The following morning, I headed straight to my boss's office to explain the situation and request an advance to cover my mother's treatment expenses. I timidly knocked on the door, and he responded with a beckoning, "Come in." I marveled at how he recognized me so effortlessly, but my surprise deepened as he began speaking without exchanging pleasantries. "I'm sorry to hear about your mother. It must be a difficult situation, requiring substantial financial resources. However, financing may prove challenging without employment." Stunned, I struggled to comprehend the purpose behind his words. Yet, summoning my courage, I recounted the events in detail, apologizing for my abrupt absence. Clutching the medical prescription, I implored him for a loan from the company to cover the expenses. To my dismay, he displayed a complete lack of empathy, replying callously, "Have you not noticed the recent wave of dismissals and resignations? It stems from a failure to meet certain requirements. I hope you are not an exception and comprehend what we're discussing." His insinuation was painfully clear, leaving me speechless and strangled by my own words. This attractive man, whose charm had once enthralled me, was trading positions for favors in the seclusion of his office. How many times had that desk witnessed such sordid transactions? I realized with dread that I could be his next victim. He concluded, leaving me in despair, "If you are interested, drop by after your shift. But if you fail to do so, do not bother returning tomorrow." The remainder of my shift passed in a haze, my mind clouded with uncertainty and fear. On one hand, I grappled with the incomprehensibility of a man leveraging power for personal gain. The attraction I once felt for him dissipated like melting ice cream under a blazing fire. However, as the clock struck 6 p.m., signaling the end of the workday, I had no choice but to hike up my skirt and acquiesce to his desires, all for the sake of my mother's health and well-being. Story 3. It was an ordinary afternoon last summer. I had been struggling with my grades in college, so I had planned to attend tutoring. Meanwhile, I was engaged to my partner, but our relationship was on shaky ground. Time was passing, and things weren't going well. As I waited for transportation, a familiar face appeared before me. It was an old family friend. We exchanged warm greetings, and he asked me where I was headed. I explained that I was going to study, and he suggested waiting for a fellow student who could give me a ride. Coincidentally, that's when I met a lively companion. Feeling slightly embarrassed by the favor, we struck up a conversation during the journey. "Thank you for the ride," I said. He replied, "No problem. I'm always willing to help, especially for a woman as beautiful as you." I blushed and didn't engage in further conversation. Upon arrival, I thanked him again and bid him farewell. However, he stopped me and proposed, "Would you like me to pick you up later? I'll be nearby running errands. We can exchange numbers and stay in touch." "That sounds perfect," I replied. "I'll call you when I need a ride." In that instant, I realized he possessed a certain spark and was genuinely kind. During my classes, I found it hard to concentrate, often wondering if I should call him to pick me up. As the class came to an end, I hurriedly left, aware that it was getting late to go home. I made the call that would change everything, giving my life an unexpected twist. It was a call to meet Enrique. I asked Enrique, my newfound friend, to pick me up, and he promptly confirmed that he would be there for me. He was a humorous and chivalrous man with a great sense of humor. His wit managed to make me laugh and momentarily forget about my worries. He drove me home, and nothing else significant happened that afternoon. As the days passed, our paths crossed again. I greeted him warmly, and he informed me that he had taken up work as a cab driver to improve his income. I expressed concern about the risks of being on the road, but assured him of my support. Without hesitation, he told me, "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to call. For you, I'll always be available. I can pick you up from the university and take you home every day of my life, just to see your tender face and hear your sweet voice." The monotony of my relationship had become overwhelming. My fiancé had grown bitter, unwilling to share or go out. He criticized my appearance and even went as far as comparing me unfavorably to other women. My self-esteem suffered as a result. Thus, when confronted with a man's sweet words, I found myself easily captivated. Although I was enjoying the game, I often questioned how much I truly desired it. I pondered whether Enrique was aware of my engagement, as the world can be a small place. However, I didn't want to disrupt the game. I longed to forget about my fiancé, even if only for a moment. Despite my love for him, I sensed that things were changing. So, I chose to remain silent. One day, as the university session ended, I called Enrique to pick me up. He arrived promptly, even earlier than expected. Conversations with him became increasingly effortless. He was incredibly easygoing. While talking inside the car, he asked if I wanted a kiss. My face flushed, and I realized I could no longer hide the truth. I mustered the courage to ask, "Do you know I have a boyfriend? That I'm even engaged?" "That doesn't bother me," he replied. "If it doesn't bother you, I can sense from your eyes that you enjoy my company. But don't worry, I'm just offering you a chocolate." I fell into deep thought. When he opened the car's glove compartment, there was a chocolate with the label, "Besitos, Little Kisses." I had fallen into his trap and burst into laughter. The games began when he said, "Although I would love to give you a real kiss, I couldn't hide it. I could tell you wanted it too." Before stepping out of the car, he stole a kiss from me. I spent the rest of the day feeling like a love-struck little girl, butterflies fluttering in my stomach. That sense of danger, of my desires not being adequately fulfilled, led us to continue seeing each other in secret. Enrique didn't mind at all. My partner consumed my thoughts and days, as we increasingly went out together. Our kisses grew more intense each time, escalating our attraction to new heights. One passionate kiss led us to a motel room, where we devoured each other insatiably. From that moment on, our connection became unbreakable. Everything felt perfect until my partner started growing suspicious and behaving differently. He became more inquisitive about my whereabouts at college and questioned why I no longer desired intimacy with him. Although he never discovered the truth, our relationship eventually crumbled due to my own distancing. Enrique was young, wild, passionate, and utterly seductive. He injected adrenaline into my life. It seemed that what mattered to me was a man who could make me laugh, a quality that equated to creativity and intelligence. Meeting him had been the most exhilarating experience of my life. I meticulously planned each encounter and reveled in the process. I knew I belonged completely to him, even though society expected me to marry and settle into an unhappy marriage to please our parents. I would confide in Enrique about the hardships my fiancé subjected me to, and we sought occasional revenge. Once, he parked the car next to my fiancé's vehicle, and behind the tinted windows, nobody could fathom what transpired within. It was there that he passionately kissed me, right under my soon-to-be husband's nose. We continued dating for a while, but it couldn't last forever. My fairy tale was reaching its conclusion when an old flame of Enrique's re-entered his life. Adelaida, the love of his life, returned with a burning desire to make up for lost time. Who wouldn't want to be with someone like Enrique? He seemed to possess everything. Yet, Adelaida was aware of his reputation as a Don Juan. I realized his heart was so expansive that he could accommodate multiple lovers. Though he often suggested I leave my boyfriend, I never trusted him enough to do so. Even though he claimed he could maintain both relationships simultaneously, as if it were a form of reciprocation, I decided to walk away for good. And so, it all came to an end.